Welcome back to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the Baltimore Ravens season recap. Despite a 17-10 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 18, the Baltimore Ravens still finished with a league-best 13-4 record, clinching the number one seed in the AFC playoffs, meaning they will have a first-round bye as the NFL playoffs start up here this upcoming weekend. Before we jump into today's episode, please make sure you press that follow button right here on Spotify, as well as check me out on other platforms at Wedge52Gridiron on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure you press follow there, as well as share with your fellow Baltimore Ravens and NFL fans as we embark on this playoff journey to see, what kind of legacy this 2023 Ravens team can create as the playoffs approach here shortly. Looking into the Steelers and Ravens matchup, Steelers took down the Ravens 17-10 in the rain. Many Ravens starters sat out, for health reasons or played in limited percentage of snaps. Again, Ravens had already clinched up that number one seed in the AFC. Therefore, we're looking to get healthy and get out of that game as healthy as possible, which the Baltimore Ravens did successfully. So they should be at full strength heading into that, divisional matchup, whoever it turns out to be, except for obviously the guys on injured reserve. But Offensive Player of the Week for the Baltimore Ravens this week was backup quarterback Tyler Huntley, who went 15 of 28 with 146 passing yards and a touchdown, as well as 8 rushes for 40 yards. Defensive Player of the Week was Del'Shawn Phillips, who had 13 tackles and a forced fumble for the Baltimore Ravens. And then a couple of other stats for the Baltimore Ravens in this matchup. Gus Edwards had 10 carries for 48 yards. Nelson Agholor, 5 catches for 39 yards. Isaiah Likely, 2 catches for 31 yards and a touchdown. And then defensively, Patrick Queen had 8 tackles. Trenton Simpson had 5 tackles and a sack. And then as well, Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy both had sacks in the loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. In terms of, more of the season recap, how the Baltimore Ravens have looked this entire season. This year's Offensive Player of the Year selected by me on the Wedge 52 Gridiron podcast. 6 different players received an Offensive Player of the Week win this season, with the winner taking home 8 Offensive Player of the Weeks. That is none other than Mr. Lamar Jackson, carrying the Baltimore Ravens team like only he can do. And, winning Offensive Player of the Year here on the Wedge 52 Gridiron, potentially the odds are in his favor to win the league MVP. Once that is announced, stay tuned. Press that follow button so you can, be updated. I will be releasing a, Lamar Jackson MVP case episode coming here shortly, so stay tuned for that one. And then defensively, a defensive unit that has been absolutely incredible for the Baltimore Ravens this entire season. Saw 8 different winners for Defensive Player of the Weeks. And then, 2 players took home 4 Defensive Player of the Weeks. So my co-Defensive Player of the Years goes to Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith, each with 4, Defensive Player of the Weeks this season. Congratulations to the 3 of them, Lamar Jackson, Kyle Hamilton, and Roquan Smith, for being the cornerstones and leaders of the Baltimore Ravens. Incredible 13-4 season so far. Obviously, that today is a different day. That 13-4 record no longer counts for anything, and the Baltimore Ravens have to go 1-0 3 times, to be cemented into NFL and Baltimore Ravens greatness. That's all that matters. 1-0 each week, 3 times, and some crazy things could happen there. On the grand, the bigger scheme for that defensive unit, like I said, been incredible all season long. Took home the defensive triple crown first time ever in NFL history that the same defense led the league in sacks, points per game allowed, and takeaways. The Baltimore Ravens defense had 60 sacks on the season, only allowed 16.5 points per game, and had 31 takeaways on the year. Absolutely incredible. A couple of those numbers, in who led the team in that. First of all, Matabike, 13 sacks on the season. That's good enough to be 9th in the league in terms of sacks. Clowney, 9.5 sacks. Kyle Van Noy, 9 sacks. And Odafe Owe, 5 sacks on the season. So those four, led the team in sacks, but all around a collective effort. Absolutely incredible season by those four. Geno Stone has 7 interceptions, second in the league. And then Kyle Hamilton has 4 interceptions, tied for 6th in the league. And Brandon Stevens has 2 interceptions on the season. So those guys, cleaning up the back end when those, big four and fellow, front rush guys don't get to the quarterback. They are, picking off a good amount of those passes. And then leading our team in tackles, Roquan Smith had 158 tackles on the season, 6th best in the NFL this season. Patrick Queen not far behind at 133 tackles, and Kyle Hamilton at 81 tackles on the season. Absolutely incredible by that Baltimore Ravens defense, who, after being faced with top-tier offense after top-tier offense, proved why they were the best defensive unit in football this season. Moving to the offensive side of the ball, Mr. Lamar Jackson, 67.2% completion percentage, 3,678 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns, just 7 interceptions, as well as 148 carries, for 821 yards and 5 touchdowns, 5.6 yards per carry for Lamar Jackson on the ground. Then Gus Edwards, 198 carries for 810 yards and 13 rushing touchdowns, tied for 5th in the NFL this season, those 13 rushing touchdowns. And then, the rest of the rushing attack, Keaton Mitchell, before, injuring his knee, looked very, very good. 47 carries for 396 yards and 2 touchdowns. And rounding out the top 4, Justice Hill, 84 carries for 387 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year for him. And then receiving-wise, a very good collective effort led by the 2 big-time pickups from the Ravens 2023 offseason. Zay Flowers, the rookie out of Boston College, had 77 receptions, 858 yards, and 5 touchdowns for Zay Flowers, breaking the Ravens rookie receiving yards record, followed by Odell Beckham Jr., who had 35 catches for 565 yards and 3 touchdowns. Odell Beckham put up good numbers on the field. I think, equally Odell Beckham's presence off the field in that locker room, with his veteran status, with the amazing career that he has had, has helped the team and offense in immeasurable amounts off the field. Obviously leading rookie wide receiver Zay Flowers to be the top target on a offense, very good offense in his rookie season. Mark Andrews, despite being injured about halfway through the season, was still our third, leader in receiving with 45 receptions for 544 yards and led the team with 6 receiving touchdowns. His replacement, Isaiah Likely, 30 catches for 411 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then Nelson Aguilar, 35 catches for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Rashad Bateman, 32 catches for 367 yards and a touchdown. Baltimore Ravens have looked incredible this season with little hiccups, couple of blemishes early on in the season as the offense was learning to adapt, as the Baltimore Ravens season was starting to come underway. The Baltimore Ravens have the number 1 overall seed and have the first round bye in the AFC. In the second round, in the divisional round of the playoffs, they will play the lowest remaining seed out of Houston and Cleveland, who face off, so potentially the winner of that game, or Miami or Pittsburgh. Like I said, the Texans, Browns, Dolphins, and Steelers are the 4 potential opponents for the Baltimore Ravens. In matchups this season, they faced Houston very, very early on and beat Houston. I believe that was week 1. They split the series with the Cleveland Browns. They beat Miami 56-19 a couple weeks ago, and both times lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers 17-10. That first loss was a very big blemish. The Baltimore Ravens beat themselves. I believe they had 8 drops in that game. And then the Week 18 matchup lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the rain with a very large chunk of Ravens starters sitting out because of the clinched 1 seed and health precautions there. Whoever the Baltimore Ravens play, it does not matter. The Baltimore Ravens have proven time and time that they can beat anyone in the league this season. The most important part of the divisional matchup is to focus on that game and that game only. Once they find out their opponent, Baltimore Ravens plan to go about practice as regular scheduled practice week with this bye week coming up right here. And then, just taking it day by day, the biggest threat to the Baltimore Ravens is going to be the Baltimore Ravens. That's pretty much all I have for today's episode of the Wedge 52 Gridiron podcast. If you made it this far, thank you all so much for listening. As always, go Ravens. Make sure you press that follow button right here, as well as check out Instagram and Twitter at Wedge 52 Gridiron to stay up to date on the latest news for this hopefully spectacular Baltimore Ravens 2023-2024 playoff run. Thank you all for listening, and go Ravens.